Can anyone hear me? Hi. Thank you all so much for coming out tonight. Oh, I'm supposed to clip this on. Okay, there we go. Nope. Okay, there we go. Sorry. Welcome, everyone. Thank you all so much for coming out on this very rainy evening, but it's lovely to be inside and warm with all of your lovely smiling faces. My name is Amali. I'm the events director here at Books Are Magic. This is the second iteration of Booksellers Read, an evening where some of the many, many talented writers on staff get the chance to highlight their own work instead of recommending all of the very famous writers whose books we have here in the store. So tonight you'll hear from novels in progress, poetry collections, screenplays, so much more. And I do have to mention that one of our wonderful readers, Josie, has a poetry collection, Gotas de Amor, which is available for purchase at the register where you checked in. Ben is jumping up and down with it right now. So I highly recommend checking that out on your way out tonight. So to get things officially started, I'll be starting us off reading a very, very short bit from a personal essay turned maybe memoir eventually someday called Scenes from Hanoi. 12 years old, alone in my room. I can recall petrichor, black tea, bits of vermicelli noodles lodged in teeth, but also shouts from the living room, a slammed door, my sister's insults, my parents' sighs, grunts from the men playing volleyball and badminton in the alleyway beneath my window. I see it all from my window. I am perched on the 10th floor of 57 Kozai, only five floors away from the top, and I am the tallest I have ever been. My room, my outlook, my fire watchtower contains 3 pieces of furniture: a bed with a squishy foam mattress beneath bright orange sheets, a bedside table with an LED reading lamp and my charging Nokia cell phone, a closet, the wood, the same light tone as the bed frame, with 2 doors that lock magnetically with a satisfying click. The largest closet I'd ever had. Through my open window, I can smell pork roasting from the banh mi cart next to the building, and I can catch a whiff of frying oil from the KFC across the corner, which I shamefully frequent for its vanilla soft serve and familiar American flavors. Spiders weave their homes in the crevices between my bed and the wall. They haunt me, following me around every inch of the house, behind our small toaster oven, next to my guitar stand, along the corners of my bathroom. The bathroom had a toilet, a sink, and a shower head, as most usually do, but no shower walls or bathtub, so water covered the entire floor whenever the shower was turned on. The first time I took a shower in my bathroom, I cried and ran out soaking wet not even 2 minutes in, terrified of the spiders. The shower stream would destroy their webs, causing them to scurry across the floor in a panic without any consideration for my own feet. I hated the spiders, so I hated taking showers. Whenever I succumbed to the need to clean my body after days of sweating in the city's blanket of smog and humidity, I would keep my eyes shut as tightly as possible, furiously shampooing as quickly as I could, trying to keep my mind away from the 8-legged creatures that might crawl up my legs and arms and consume my entire body. I try to stay out of our small apartment as much as possible. My parents are too preoccupied with my sister's constant mood swings to worry about my extracurriculars. So this is the year I become an athlete. My best friend Clara explains that our school is part of the Mekong River International Schools Association, MRISA, and that each school rotates through hosting various tournaments. I have no sports experience whatsoever, but my hunger to travel, to wander, to be elsewhere completely snuffs out any apprehensions I have about my skill level. In September, Claire and I joined the basketball team and travel to Laos to compete. I make the first shot of the weekend and none after it. In November, we play a soccer tournament in Bangkok. The first time we work on our headers during after-school practice, I leap up, my face pinched tight in anticipation, ready for impact, and the ball soars over my head, and I land on my butt with a thud. In April, we hop on a bus south to Ho Chi Minh City for a volleyball championship. Our team never makes first place, or second, or third, or even fifth, but we always receive the award for best sportsmanship. On every trip, I secure my tiny digital camera to my wrist and take photos of everything. They still exist in the depths of my Facebook profile. Me and Clara snapping a selfie with a Thai security guard in the airport. Our classmates on the boys' soccer team posing with their fingers up in peace signs. Me on the volleyball court, my bony arms outstretched and my knees bent into a deep lunge while the ball arcs on a trajectory into my nose. Clara's friend from the school in Ho Chi Minh City, Benedict, the first girl I ever kissed, stuffing her mouth with marshmallows during our mid-tournament slumber party. I would come home bruised and exhausted and click through every photo with my mom, rattling off a story with every slide while she watched me with a soft smile and eyes full of melancholy. Thank you. That's all I have for tonight. And coming up next, it's my pleasure to introduce Isabella Barbuto, who is a writer and lover from the Hudson Valley. She spends her time thinking about things that are bothering her and how to get them to stop. Everyone, please give a warm welcome to Isabella.
Hi. Give me a minute. Okay, I'm going to read an essay I wrote called On Acting. It was opening night for The Mermaid at the smallest one-room theater in a small town in upstate New York. Almost no one had heard of this theater company, and those who had were usually homeschooled and seemingly socially inept, which I only say because I have the proof. This theater was lodged on the busiest street in town, so busy, in fact, that my dad wouldn't bother to drop me off in front, but went to the parking lot down the street to avoid traffic that could lead to our car stalling in the middle of the road. It's on its last leg, my dad would say. That's why the door creaks when you open it, or the reason it stalls at red lights. The car had been on its last leg for the last 4 years, and would continue to be until I reached high school, when it finally died, and my family mourned it deeply. The car situation was never ideal for me, but once in front of the building, you had to walk up a steep staircase, and by the time you got to the top, you would have to pause for a good minute to catch your breath. In the winter, a rush of warmth welcomed you before you pushed the heavy, bright, purple velvet curtains aside and entered the room where you would be pushed to be the best version of yourself. As a child of age 10, you can't imagine the feelings of disbelief and disappointment I endured as soon as I walked into the rehearsal room on that first day. The director of the play and owner of the theater company, Marguerite, was explaining the show, but to my dismay, this was not what I had signed up for. I assumed, like any other child of 10, that The Mermaid would be Disney's The Little Mermaid, and damn, was I wrong. As I searched around the room for eyes that could meet my feelings of discontent, I discovered I was the only one. Did the other kids know? Did their parents tell them that the posting in town was not, in fact, for The Little Mermaid they knew and loved, but a strange, abstract version with eels and no one named Ariel? When I asked my mother about this, she too discovered that she had been fooled by the advertisement. I didn't think there was another version. And who did you say you were cast as? The mermaid's servant and the prince's overweight French assistant? The Mermaid was the first of many productions I was involved in at this particular theater. Maybe it was the charm of the building itself, or perhaps the paralyzing fear I felt when I was unable to remember a line, which the director would then humiliate me for in front of the homeschooled actors, who would stand there staring at me, amused by my shortcomings. They would congregate together before rehearsal, reading their dense fiction or deliberating about world economics. Even so, there was something about this that kept me coming back for more. Most of the plays I was involved in would happen during the school year, so for me, as the only public school kid involved, the nights were especially dreadful. "How late is rehearsal tonight, Isabella?" my mother would ask as I sat at our kitchen table, shuffling through my script, trying my darndest to memorize my servant lines. Marguerite says 9, but that usually means 10, give or take 15. Marguerite did not care for our personal schedules, and eventually I came to learn that this is what makes a dedicated artist. There was no time to study ancient Mesopotamia for my social studies test on Friday, especially if I wanted to be taken seriously as an actor. For late evening rehearsals, when we were given around 20 minutes for dinner, my mother would make me tuna fish sandwiches cut into 4 squares on whole wheat bread with a side of Cheez-Its or carrot sticks. I felt satisfied with my tuna sandwiches, but soon I realized all the other actors were getting takeout delivered and eating oysters or braised rabbit risotto from the bistro down the street. I waved to my parents and sister through the stage-left curtain before we began on opening night. It was a short wave because Marguerite caught me 30 seconds in and frantically rushed over. My heart thudded in my chest, afraid of what would happen next. I could see her wrestling with the thick black curtain as she pushed her way over to where I stood backstage. Her arms were still flailing to regain balance as she reached me to give me a stern and frightening talking to about how inappropriate breaking the fourth wall was. She said real actors never break the fourth wall. I'd never again make the mistake of not being in character 30 minutes before a show again. I would learn to avoid Marguerite at all costs on show nights. It was hard to know what to expect from her, so it proved best to not be in her way. She would bark orders at her husband, who was usually the art director of the shows. He single-handedly designed and made the sets, which for the mermaid ended up being some clumps of tinsel in random piles, and a string with longer tinsel hanging from it, stretching across the back of the stage. These were supposed to be the waves in the ocean. Avoiding Marguerite became almost like a game to me. I would hide in the dressing room and the bathroom, and soon noticed that her husband did the same. I slowly regained confidence, and eventually the play began, and not Ariel was on stage, which meant that I, her servant, would be needed shortly. At the end of Act 1, when it was time for me to go on stage as the prince's French assistant, Francois, I was more than ready. I remember flashes of that performance as I stood on top of the prince's ship with a pillow down my pants and one shoved up my shirt. I wondered, whose pillow is this, and should it be so close to my underpants? This is when I began to have a few doubts about the theater. After the show, everyone dispersed. The homeschooled kids went off with their parents to eat pork cheek tacos, while my parents got caught up listening to Marguerite explain her plans for the upcoming production of Pinocchio. We left the theater, pushing aside the heavy purple curtains with Marguerite close behind us, making sure to pull them back together after we left. Once on the street, we looked back up at the building. A figure was sprawled out on a couch, and all the lights were being turned off. Marguerite was tired. Her work was done, and it was time for her to rest. Thank you.
Everyone give it up for Isabella. We're now going to start to make our switch from nonfiction into fiction. And I'm going to introduce Alexa Brahmi, who is a writer from Southern California. Her work has been nominated for a Pushcart Prize, the Robert J. Dow Penn Award, and Best of the Net. Her debut novel, Good News, is forthcoming from Algonquin Books in 2026, and that's the best news I've heard in a while. Everyone please give it up for Alexa.
Thank you, guys. So I'm reading an excerpt from the novel, and it is a flashback to when the main character Maggie is in college, and all you need to know is that she is an artist and her parents wish she was a doctor. Kissing Rakib is like kissing God, Maggie once texted her friend Grace their sophomore year of college. The first time Maggie saw Rakib was at a Halloween party. She had just failed a test that would end up being the score that stripped her of any chances she had to minor in chemistry, something she was striving for in secret, in hopes that when they announced it at graduation, her parents would shed tears of joy alongside their tears of despair. She had not gotten a single point, an absolute 0. Even Maggie hadn't thought she was capable of such failure. Determined to turn the night around, Grace convinced Maggie to stuff herself into a corset 2 sizes too small, adorn cherry red horns, and call herself the devil. Even your eyes are red, she said when she stepped back to observe Maggie, who had not stopped crying for the past hour and a half. Over the course of the evening, Maggie drank her body weight in grain alcohol and kept threatening to call members of her family to tell them she was dropping out of school. With her crooked horns atop her head and her breasts pushed up nearly to her own nostrils, she had abandoned her self-pitying tears and instead adopted a throw caution to the wind attitude. Who needed a degree anyway? And who had even come up with a concept so stupid as college? The party was a dark and sweaty house party, like every other social event they'd attended as undergrads, and Maggie's body was touching at least 3 other people at any given moment. Separated from Grace, she spent a considerable amount of time on a search and rescue mission through the bedrooms, when eventually, exasperated, she gave up and found she was touching Rakib all over. He was tall, dressed in a black suit and wearing sunglasses inside. His thick black hair formed a unanimous wave that swooped backwards. Maggie asked him who he was supposed to be dressed as. A character from a movie, apparently. He said the title, but she couldn't hear him over the din of the party. And what are you? He asked. Well, isn't it obvious? Rakib cocked his head to the side, and Maggie couldn't see what his eyes were doing behind his sunglasses. I'm the devil, she said, and reached to click her nails against her horns. Her hand landed flat against her head, and she discovered that her horns had disappeared, probably trampled beneath their feet. I see it now, Rakib said. Very dangerous. A laugh she didn't recognize as her own pealed from Maggie. So dangerous, she thought. Dangerous to herself, to those she loved. Rakib lowered his sunglasses to reveal startlingly dark eyes peering down into Maggie. Her stomach turned, and a hand appeared on her shoulder. It was Grace, her fingernails bitten down to the nubs. Where were you? She wailed. Maggie turned around to face her and discovered that Grace was now the one weeping uncontrollably. What do you mean? Maggie asked, a little bewildered. I'm right here. She's here! Grace's voice had become raw and stripped of any quality that made it human. She's here with him! Immediately, Maggie understood. The love of Grace's life was in this crowded, sweaty hellscape with the man she had left Grace for after realizing her lesbianism was just a phase. Oh, Gracie, Maggie said, wrapping her friend into her arms. Grace's snot bubbled into Maggie's chest. Let's go, she said, already pulling Grace toward the door. Her small frame stayed clinging to Maggie as they hobbled down the hallway. Maggie turned her head to look for Rakib. He had pushed his sunglasses back up the bridge of his nose and was watching her drift away from him. She tried to give him a pathetic look. Take pity on me and my poor friend, it said. I never would have left if it wasn't so dire. Maggie's gaze was so heavy it practically sighed. Isn't love terrible? How it absolutely debases us? Rakib's chin dropped in a slow, understanding nod, seeming to pick up on everything Maggie had telepathed to him. Just as they reached the edge of the party, he gave a little wave, and it was Grace who made the final push that propelled them through the crowd and out the front door. Thank you.
I'm so excited for that book to come out. I need to skip 2025 and go immediately into 2026. Everyone, keep it going for Alexa. And coming up next, it's my pleasure to introduce Michaela Bryant, who is a writer from North Carolina who loves translated literature, ambient music, WWE, wearing camo, and believes that the best movie franchise to ever exist is Fast and Furious. Please give it up for Michaela.
Hey. That was so unserious. Hi. I'm reading a collection that I'm writing called Humdrum Ephrata. It's kind of like the celebration of life and the beauty and the mundane of everything, good, bad, ugly, sad. And so I'm going to be reading 4 or 5 poems for you all. So this one is called Start. Trips up and down 501, Tercel engine squeaks, scratch cassette tapes recommence, superstitiously playing each tape alphabetized by artists for good luck. Never-ending rides around town, evening aches to escape confinement in the languid existence in rural North Carolina, daydreams of vivacious city streets and never-ending nights, desire to shape-shift into another being, I snap back to this current reality and feel flutters of wind cool the in-betweens of my fingertips, purple box braids gust the sides of my face, the sun has begun to set, scratch cassette tapes recommence. So the second one, because I mentioned I love Fast and Furious, so I'm going to be writing about Suki from Fast and Furious. This is a love letter to her. Dear Suki, I fell in love with you through the television screen at 10 years old. When I first laid eyes on you, double layer crop tops, short shorts, and chaps, it was the moment pink and purple became my favorite colors. Selfless and stoic structure, unafraid of anything, you tested the bounds of patriarchy revolving around fast cars. You taught me about the beauty of Honda S2000, no nitros bottles, drifting techniques that had you reaching for the stars. You showed me the beauty of community, how to be unapologetic, how to be fearless. You showed me how to love. This third one is called Family Reunion. Late night porch sermons, smells of charcoal and fire latching onto every inch of me, filled bodies and lawn chairs, stars that light up our dark skin, shuffling of dogs chasing chickens, cold Modelo's that freeze fingertips, late night stories that echo off neighbors' houses, Luther Vandross, Shaka Khan, Isley Brothers, SOS Band, Usher, Janet Jackson. The bass hamming on the Toyota Corolla speakers, we dance into the sunrise until our bodies grow weak before we inch the bed. And our last one is called Marsha P. Johnson, Park on a Saturday Night. Nescient strolls through dirt pathways, skin glistening from the July heat, the mundane evening awes. An orange and yellow sunset falls behind the immense buildings, pale full moon blinds. Remnants of day pollute the evening sky. Ripples of the river washes up pieces of past late night affairs. Anecdotes and laughter fill the air around me. Home is where the heart is. Thank you.
Everyone give it up for Michaela. I've never watched any of the Fast and Furious movies, but I feel like hearing a poem about them is the sign that I need to watch them as soon as I get home. So we're halfway through. How's everyone feeling? All right. So we're going to get into some of the genre fiction writers in our staff. I'd love to introduce Ariana Arroyo, who is a native New Yorker who spends countless hours reading on the train. She loves children's books, fantasy, romance, and anything that makes her cry. Everyone, please join me in giving Ariana a very warm welcome.
Hi, everybody. All right. I woke up to Jose's muffled cries seeping through the crack in my bedroom floorboards. It's often that I hear his sobs, like a cat coming to wake you for food. He started crying 4 years ago when his mother passed away. Doña Lucia died from stomach cancer, and she hid it well, and Jose hasn't stopped crying since. It's not that he cries every single day, but on the days he does, it can be kind of nice, dependable, like falling rain. As long as he's crying, I know he's breathing. But this time around, his cries grated my skull like an untuned radio. He isn't much of a morning crier, and that made me jolt upright. Ripping off the sheets, I made my way to the bathroom and leaned into the sink, straining to hear. He died this morning. Don't joke about those things. You know words are, I'm not lying. He was in his chair and the TV was on. Ay, Diosito Santo. I can already picture Mrs. Davis clutching her rosary. The worst part is, she trails off before taking a deep breath. He was covered in ants. No one knows how long he was just there being eaten by them. Erupting in goosebumps, I skate across the living room in my socks, dropping to my knees by the busted outlet. My hands feel the buzzing hum of the building. Everyone must be awake. Bending down and getting as close to the outlet as possible, I try to catch as much of the conversation as possible. I'm telling you, it's all that garbage he had in his home. That can't be healthy. Maritza, you know, it was messy, but it wasn't dirty. The poor guy just had a lot of stuff. And you weren't complaining about it when he had that wire for you that old blender needed. Ronnie saved you like $50. Maritza sighs. I know, but still, the place was a barbecue starter. We're lucky it didn't go up in flames. Well, it's not like anyone goes to him for anything anymore. These new generations, I tell you, she says disapprovingly. I can picture her shaking her head. They see a hole in a shirt and they throw it out. The solution is always to buy the best new thing, and then they complain about not having money. Silence falls over them. How do you think Jose's doing? I don't know. Mario opened the fridge this morning and heard him crying. I kept it closed out of respect. Another sigh. Stay for a while then. I'll go heat up some water. The floorboards creak as I lean back to rest on my heels. My hands lie limp on the floor, useless. Ronnie is gone. Part of me never expected him to ever die, really. I was convinced he would outlive me and that parrot in 6E. I fully sit back on the floor and rub my red knees. My fingers trace the 3 bumps on the left one. If they were Braille, they would be the letter O. Ronnie taught me that. He was the one who picked out the 3 shards of glass. I was 9 and I was burying a baby sparrow that hadn't made it through the night. I was kneeling on glass the whole time and hadn't even noticed. I had been so mad at Natalia from 2F. I told her not to touch the bird or its mother wouldn't want it. And 10 minutes later, she had the baby bird cupped in her hands. Natalia said she couldn't take him home, so I did. We'd named him Junior. Neither Junior nor his mother would ever really know why they were separated or why they would live the rest of their lives without each other. I was inconsolable, and I explained all of this to Ronnie through hiccuping sobs, and he listened. He worked diligently on my cuts, but made sure to look me in the eyes any chance he got. I remembered his brow was furrowed, and he nodded along, acknowledging my pain. That week, Iris from 3B complained to my mom because every time she opened the faucet, she could hear me crying. She hadn't been able to wash the dishes in days without getting a headache. As I got older, I wondered if Ronnie had been playing up his sympathy for a crying child's sake. But one day, my mom casually told me his life story while we were snacking on some oranges. ¿Sabías? He used to come from a really big family. He had 3 sisters and a brother. He was the oldest. I tried to imagine Ronnie as a young man fitting in a portrait, and I couldn't. In a family portrait, and I couldn't. Yeah, she said to my confused look. They all moved here when he was 12, and his father ran away with a younger woman. His mother took up drinking, and then he watched everyone die, one by one. She picked that pith like lint on an expensive sweater. My God, I let out slowly. Oh yeah, she said, nodding. 1 died from cancer, 2 died in a car crash. His sisters, I think. And then he watched his baby brother die from AIDS. She paused to sprinkle salt on the orange slice. Before popping it into her mouth, she wagged it at me like a scolding finger. You see, you kids take us for granted, but your life can change in a second. I fought the urge to roll my eyes, but successfully internalized her words. Wait, I said. Is that why his apartment is so full of stuff? Is he just a hoarder because he's depressed? My mom shook her head, chewing thoughtfully. No, those are all their belongings. His family's, I mean. Who do you think had to clean out their homes? It's so hard to get rid of things that hold so many memories. I get it. I still have the receipt from your first haircut in my purse. And then a break. There's a thin line of ants making their way up the stairs. I wait for a break in the line before filling in to walk up the 2 floors to Ronnie's apartment. Gently stepping over the quivering thread of ants, I approach the 2 new tenants from 6D. They're speaking rapidly in hushed tones, their arms wrapped around their bodies like straitjackets. As if rehearsed, they stop talking and turn to me with the same concerned brow and delicate frown. I stare back at them, wondering why they're in front of Ronnie's apartment. Hey, Tenant 1 says softly. I don't know if you're aware, Angel passed this morning. I nod slowly. Tenant 2 jumps in. We're actually the reason they found him. We called the cops to check in. At best, we were hoping they'd be able to tell him to turn down the volume. The TV static was just so loud. He looks down at the floor, shaking his head. When he wasn't answering, they started asking us how old he was and if he lived alone, and when they got inside, well, you know. I look at them both for a few seconds longer and walk past them. Ronnie's apartment door is open. The edges of the metal are dented from the forced entry. Even though I know he's not there, it feels disrespectful to just walk in uninvited. The ants do not seem to have the same issue. The dancing thread leads inside. I hope Ronnie didn't leave food out. That would be very out of character for him. Determined to find out, I walk in and follow the ant trail through the apartment. I'd never noticed that he didn't have any photographs up, just vintage posters and kitschy art. Looking around, I try to memorize every inch of the living room, knowing full well it's an impossible task. There are worn shoe boxes stacked in a corner, labeled laces, cracked tiles, cloth scraps, and so on. There are random cables tied together with rubber bands in neat piles on a dusty coffee table. A china cabinet full of mismatched plates and mugs, waiting to be claimed. The ants start to gather around my feet and patiently wait until I'm done before they lead me into the kitchen. There's a box of cinnamon harvest tea on the counter, some stale bread in a bag, and some unripe bananas. Muffled voices are coming from the pantry at the end of the kitchen. As I make my way over, the voices get louder and I hear tenants 7 and 8 from 1A talking. Such a tragic event. But is it terrible for me to say it was a blessing in disguise? Honestly, I was thinking the same thing, says tenant 8. The few times I got to look inside that apartment, I felt claustrophobic. Mental illness is so hard, but he was inviting pests. Exactly, says tenant 7. I empathize, but I don't want ants or roaches or mice. Besides, I never really liked him. For someone named Angel, he sure didn't act like one. He seemed like a miserable guy, agrees tenant 8. Tears drip down my face and land like rain in a pond, making ripples in the now swarming body of ants. Together we head back to the living room and I pick up a box of buttons I'm well acquainted with. The buttons in this box once made their way all over the building. Replacements on sweaters, new eyes for beloved stuffed animals, and new additions to someone else's collection. I used to go through it like buried treasure, and Ronnie always let me take as many as I wanted. The tears stream down faster, and I stand in front of his armchair. The cushion is sunken in from decades of sitting there every night to watch TV. The ants form pockets on the floor, scurrying to avoid the moisture from my eyes. I remember the birthmark right above Ronnie's left eyebrow, the way he laughed when Jose was over, the way he always smelled of cigar smoke and too much fabric softener. The ants have now formed into a giant circle around me in the chair. We're in the eye of the storm. I can hear their bodies scraping against one another, legs moving frantically, making the floor vibrate. The noise is deafening, like TV static. I cry harder and my tears soak into the rug. A long stretch of time passes and my sobs quiet down. My eyes are swollen and there's a deep ache in my chest. The ants that are circling have gone still, dead from exhaustion. Clutching the box of buttons to my chest, I whisper a quick thank you and make my way out of the apartment. I try to close the door behind me, but it's fruitless. The new tenants are still outside. They peer into the apartment, see the dead ants, and make a face. When they finally peel their eyes away, they spot the box in my hands before looking up at me and resetting their faces, emoting what they think is sympathy. Listen, tenant 1 says, we've been talking with some of the other tenants, and I know it's really soon after last night's tragic events, but some of us would love to volunteer to clean out Angel's apartment. As far as we know, he doesn't have any immediate family, and we'd love to honor his memory by decluttering his place. We can donate some things so they have a second life, but so much in there just needs to be thrown out. If he had a pest problem, we also don't want it spreading, you know? They weren't asking. They'd already made up their minds. In that moment, I wonder what sound she would make if I sliced her kneecaps and reached through the meat to strangle her bones. Would her scream sound like the one trying to burst through my chest? Thank you.
Oh, give it up for Ariana. I feel like You really know good writing when you get chills under like 2 layers of long sleeve shirts. That was incredible. Up next, we have Sarah Jane Abbott. Sarah Jane sells, ghostwrites, and edits books for kids. She is one in a long line of Franklin W. Dixons with a Hardy Boys book on the shelves. She lives in Brooklyn with her impish cat, Loki. Please give it up for Sarah Jane.
Hi, thanks everyone for coming. I'm going to read an excerpt of my novel. It's basically my sapphic historical Magneto and Professor X romance. It's 1856 in the notorious 5 Points slum, and a group of young people with supernatural abilities use them to steal from New York's wealthy elites. They've offered a circus performer with metal manipulation powers a place in their group. She's undecided. Just a content warning, this contains some domestic violence. There was no reason tonight for Bill to be so cross. The show had been perfect. Vanessa's usual trick of throwing knives at Fanny while blindfolded had been flawless. But then, when did Bill ever need a reason? He dragged her across the fairgrounds toward the cluster of caravans where the cast lives. Cyrus, the strongman, was posted on his stool and gave Vanessa a worried glance as she and Bill went by, but she returned it with a well-practiced smile. As soon as the wagon door was shut, Bill set into the whiskey. The sharp smell of his sweat and the liquor were soon suffocating in the confined space. Vanessa lit the oil lamps, then sat down on the bed, taking off her soft ribboned shoes. Bill was always edgy when they were getting ready to leave a place. Tomorrow they would have to break down and pack the tents, secure the menagerie for transport, round up all of the cast into their wagons, and be off. Vanessa wasn't even sure where they were going next. Bill rarely told anyone, certainly not her. The glass beads on the costume clacked against one another as Vanessa began to unlace and remove the bodice. "Be careful with that, it's my property," Bill said. Vanessa heard the danger in his tone. "I know," she said gently. "The tent was almost full tonight. It's been a good run here. Those beads are expensive, and if I see any fall off, maybe you'd like to take it off me then." Vanessa gave him a lascivious look, but it was as hopeless an attempt at distraction as the first. Things felt inevitable now, gaining momentum beyond her control. Bill strode towards Vanessa and backhanded her before she could brace herself. She fell off the bed and a sharp pain shot through her wrist. The impact with the floor was hard, and Vanessa could feel beads breaking against the wood. She saw a few catch the light and twinkle as they rolled away. "Look what you did," Bill shouted. Instinctively, Vanessa's mind reached out for her throwing knives, 8 sharp little pieces of metal across the room. With barely a thought, she could send one flying into Bill's back. "Do it," she willed herself, as Bill put down his whiskey and shucked his jacket, hulking over her in his shirt sleeves. "I'm sorry," Vanessa said, crawling backwards, "but Fanny can sew them back on." "Do it," her mind whispered, as Bill removed his belt. But as always, the knives remained still. Vanessa closed her eyes and steeled herself for the blows to fall. Suddenly, the door of the wagon burst open. Vanessa looked up, and through the blur of her watery eyes, she expected to see Cyrus. But it was the girl from last night, Jack, back as she said she would be. Behind her came Bill, an exact mirror image of Bill. Vanessa blinked and blinked. The blow to her head must have been harder than she thought. "What the hell?" the real Bill slurred, rubbing a hand across his eyes. In an instant, the second ringmaster transformed into a different person altogether, a delicate-featured girl so pale of complexion and hair they looked ghostly in the lamplight. Vanessa shrieked and scuttled away on the floor. "What the hell?" Bill repeated, striding towards the strangers, raising his belt. "Freeze and shut up," Jack said. Bill stopped immediately, standing perfectly still and silent. It was then that Vanessa noticed his eyes. They'd gone an unnatural shade of luminous silver, which was mirrored in Jack's eyes. God in heaven, she really can do what she said, Vanessa thought. It was all true. "You like hurting your wife, do you?" Jack asked. Something in her voice chilled Vanessa to her core. She could see Bill straining, the muscles in his neck and arms tensing, but he remained still. Why don't you see how you like it? Take that belt and beat your own back. Bill raised the belt and started lashing at his back over his shoulders. The blows resounded through the wagon, and with each crisp snap, Vanessa's terror rose. Jack, we don't have time for this, the one who had changed their shape hissed. Make him stay put and let's get out of here. But Jack was unmoved. Listen to me, you're taking it too far. You're terrifying the girl. Jack looked over at Vanessa with those vacant mercury glass eyes. Vanessa's heart raced. She wanted to scream, but felt like she was choking. Then Jack turned to Bill and ordered him to stop, and Bill stopped. Jack picked up one of Vanessa's throwing knives from the table by the door. Take this, she said, handing it to Bill. He took it. Jack, stop, the shape changer said, sharp and fast. Do not. Now go into the corner there and slit your throat, Jack said, pointing, quietly. Bill turned and walked swiftly towards the corner, the knife in his hand. Jack approached Vanessa and stood in her line of sight, blocking her view of her husband. Vanessa felt lightheaded as her heart raced. It's okay, we're friends. Remember me? This is Diana, part of my family. We're here to help you. Vanessa could back away no more. She was up against the wall. Jack knelt and Vanessa screamed. No, no, Jack whispered. The silver was draining from her eyes, which returned to an amber brown, softer. We're not going to hurt you. From the corner there was a sickening squelching sound, a loud thump, and the clatter of the silver knife hitting the floor. Vanessa felt certain now that tonight was the night she would die. A shadow fell across her, and she looked up into the face of the other one, Diana. God, Jack really fucked this up, Diana whispered. Then to Vanessa, you'd better come with us. Vanessa knew they were right. There was no way she could stay here. Everyone knew that Bill beat her. Now he was dead by her knife. Plenty of women were hanged for killing their husbands, whether or not the bastards deserved it. Besides, the coppery smell of blood hung thick in the air, and her caravan was so small, her husband's body so close. The shapeshifter put out a hand, and Vanessa relented. At least this one was not a murderer. She grasped their outstretched hand, allowing herself to be helped up. Her head swam, and Diana supported her when she swayed for a moment. Vanessa blinked until her vision cleared, and out of the corner of her eye, she saw Bill's prone form on the floor with a dark, slick pool spreading around him. She had to get out of there, now. It was freezing outside, and in her costume, Vanessa was as good as naked. She snatched her mantle off the hook by the door, then followed her uncanny companions out of the caravan, where they were swallowed up by the night. Okay, thank you.
Keep it going for Sarah Jane. We've got just a couple more readers for you tonight. So up next, I'm going to introduce Grace Huang. Grace is a psychological horror enthusiast who has been published in the Folklore Review and Sandpiper magazine. She loves insatiable and irredeemable characters who remind us that we all have blood on our hands, and no matter how much we weep in them, the red will never come out completely. Please enjoy her reading, but not too much. Give it up for Grace.
Hi everyone, thank you for coming out tonight. So I'm going to be reading Damselfish. There's a little yellow armchair in her office that patients sit in. They trace their fingers over the staunch floral embroidery as they reflect on their lives, absent-mindedly rubbing at the faded stains on the armrest. It was a gift from her mother, if Lori could even call it that. It wasn't given to her as much as it had been assigned. She supposed that's what the agreement was, as her brother had very pig-headedly called her regarding ownership a week before she had died. Lori hadn't shown up the day they dissected their mother's life into assets, so the chair went to her. The patients never seemed to mind it much. Lori's patients were strange people from odd and shady corners of the city, spending much of their time hiding either themselves or something they didn't want others to see, until they paid Lori to take a crowbar to the issue. Sometimes they complained about small things. Those are the hard days, days where she dumbly and numbly nodded along to their mundane questions. Yes, the chair really does have a broken spring, and yes, traffic on the Belt Parkway is horrible at noon, and no, she didn't mind that they were late. Sometimes they wanted to talk big things, a big divorce, a big abusive childhood, big trauma. Those are easy days. Those are the days her mind stays sharper for longer, whittling away on the blunt edges of broken people. She had spent much of her adolescence wondering about the strange state of her deteriorating home, taking one psychology program after another to uncover some huge, non-existent secret that might have explained something about her mother. Lori wouldn't call it an obsession. Not really. It started as a sick curiosity. There is a survival mechanism that demands animals watch when another is devoured, no matter how grotesque, no matter how painful, for the sake of survival and self-preservation. She once had a patient no older than 14 sitting in the yellow chair. There were 3 older folks outside, none of which were old enough to be her parents. She sat there, demurely twisting her brown hair round and round her finger until it was almost irritating enough to distract Lori from the bruises lining her face. "It doesn't hurt much," she'd say, voice crinkling like paper, whistling like a weak wind, faint enough to blow past just anyone. "Marks will be gone soon." Lori wanted to agree. It probably didn't hurt much, and it probably would be gone soon. She wanted to tell her to suck it up, to ask her why she even came out in public all purple and blue with a busted lip if it doesn't hurt much. But she didn't. Instead, she placed a hand on the girl's knee. "I'm glad you've entrusted me with this." She tells her what will allow her to keep her job, tells her how to keep her problems at bay, and it works just fine. Then the girl leaves and is cured for as long as it takes for her family to beat her again. Beating a kid fucks them up bad. That Lori knew. She learned it while racing through her shiny new degree. It makes them violent, apathetic, prone to crack addiction, sex addiction, looking for attention addiction. Lori's mother used to scoop her up deep in the cushions of the yellow armchair. "Lori," her mother would say in a hushed whisper, her warmth washing over Lori's small face. She'd trace a warm finger in circles over her cheek, holding Lori as if she'd slip away with the wind. "My life could have been so much better." And she'd hum this to her until Lori drifted into a slumber. So much better, so much better. When Lori is alone in her office, she swaddles herself in a large red swiveling chair at the desk and dabs a pasty concealer under her eyes. In most sessions, clients don't notice Lori doodling in her notepad, sketching the outline of her patients in vague, looping shapes. If she felt like it, she'd lean over and offer a box of tissues, just far enough out of reach to require them to scramble awkwardly to blow their nose. But other times, it gave her a euphoric high to see patients skimming the borders of her own life. It was a testament to how things could have worked out differently for Lori, to the possibility that she could have turned out even less fucked up, even less pitiable, but didn't. At the end of the day, she locks the door to her office and stands by the window, looking down from the great height where she stood, pretending to crush pedestrians like ants under her fingers. A patient had told her she wished she could become tiny, so tiny she would disappear. "My won't let me live. They need so much from me and I'm so tired. I need my life back." "Learn to draw a healthy distance," Lori said, wondering if her own mother considered distance between them healthy. "Distance sounds like a good idea," her client agreed. Lori ends the session early, irritated that her time was wasted. She closes early that day and goes about her usual routine, checking the window locks, the desk locks, the back door. She circles the room once, twice, 3 times until she's sure all her tasks are complete. Of course, in the middle of all her modern furniture is the yellow armchair, sticking out like a bleach-faded, smoke-stained yellow thumb. She stands over it, eyes glistening in the silvery light of the moon. It is always quiet when Lori clocks out. She is alone in her office again tonight, her shoulders drawn close and tight. She examines a small container of concealer in the starry light of the city skyline, admiring and hating the gleam on the clinical black screw-on cap. She rolls it languidly between the pads of her index finger and thumb. How had her mother looked, felt, dying, all alone? Lori tried to imagine it best she could. The sinew of her calf twitches as she ponders. She bends one finger, then 2. Had her mother flexed her wrist backwards then, like Lori was doing now? It starts as a slow process. The subtle details at the start that require the most accuracy. A twitch here, a harsh exhale there, then the slow, quivering stiffness of Lori's body begins. Lori stiffens her neck and exhales harshly when her body trembles with exertion. Then, she sucks in a breath and throws her head back, hard, punching through the armchair's hardened cushion, her head connecting with the wooden frame with a splintering crack. She breaks into a fit. The wooden pegs cut into her soft skin of her ankles, eating away into the cake concealer to reveal pink and blistered skin. She contracts and releases her muscles until her body is burning, throwing her limbs askew, the blunt force pushing a hot wetness to her eyes. She mimics the nightmarish images until she had concocted as best as possible, thinking desperately of anything she could remember, the police reports, the coffin measurements. Her nightmares, her mother's voicemails, the open casket funeral, how her mother's balmy skin was patchy with mortuary makeup, how it licked at the dark edges of a bruise on the apple of her pallid cheek, how Lori nicked the mortician's vial of concealer to fix it herself, how warm her mother used to be, and how cold and glass-eyed she was afterward. Lori continued spasming until the ringing in her ears sounded like church bells, like black suits, like the wailing of a grown and widowed man, like the lowering of a body in a box in the distance. The paramedics had found her mother in a strange predicament, twisted into an impossible human pretzel and stiff as a board, dry drool leaking from her cracked lips, head welded into her right shoulder, shit and piss running, caked down her legs, stiff with postmortem rigidity. Words of solace. She's in a better place now. Lori recalled their sentiments faintly, as if she was listening from deep under the surface of rippling water. Better place now. This reverberated always. She blamed it on how sound travels faster in water than in air. She has always been submerged in her pathetic little goldfish bowl, swimming circles in the same thoughts for years at a time. She wonders then if this counts as an attempt to swim. She hauled the yellow abomination to every professional cleaner in the city after her mother had died, and in each location she had been turned away, servicers' polite yet abhorred expressions thinly veiled. In the end, only a soft bristled toothbrush and dish detergent could remove the traces of staining. The more obvious imperfections were hidden among yellow upholstered fabric. And for once, she was glad of the chair's putrid color. When she's able to catch her breath between the panting, she can't help but bellow at the lunacy, and it echoes in the room, down the hall, and in her head until it gives rise to raucous laughter. The walls of the room around her tremble, and the sound overpowers the low moaning of the floorboards, the late-night traffic, and the sound of her own cursed heart thrumming dully in her ears. This is how Mom died, in a better place, without company, without responsibility, without Lori. Thank you. Oh yeah, thank you.
All right, the time has come for the final reader of the evening. It's my pleasure to introduce Josie Melendez, who is a multi-hyphenate Puerto Rican writer. She is the founder of the Film Posers podcast, and her work can be read in multiple publications, including Elle, The Latinx Project, Them, and Sundance. Most importantly, she's also the author of the Spanish language poetry collection, Gotas de Amor. Everyone, please give a huge round of applause for Josie.
Let me see if I can do this right. Amazing. Hi, so I'm going to be reading a monologue from a script. Context is that, oh, hello. Context is that this character just got out of a situationship. Unfortunately for her as well, she's also going into a job interview for which she starts oversharing way more than she should. Well, I find comfort in romance novels. You know what to expect each time. They almost always have a happy ending. Men are better in them too, less disappointing. They don't string you along, and if they do, there's a big romantic gesture and they actually apologize for hurting you, right? In real life, you'll go on 2 dates and you'll be talking for like 3 weeks. Next thing you know, you're at their apartment, half naked, straddling this man, and he has the audacity to tell you he just wants to be friends. Like, what are you supposed to say to that? No, thank you? I'm not looking for another bestie? It almost feels like being in a snow globe. And it's nice and calm until someone comes and messes it all up. Sure, there's glitter everywhere and it's pretty,
but you're left gasping, shaken, and confused. All you can think about is when he told you that someday he'd like to have 4 kids, 2 boys and 2 girls, his own little soccer team. Why would you tell someone that if you don't plan to have anything with them? And do you know what he'd love to name one of those little girls? Esperanza. He's over here talking about hope while he's taking it all away from you. Romance is the reason I moved to New York. It can make someone grow up wanting to find love in the big city like all those people in movies and books. Instead, her love life turns out to be more like a rejected Sex and the City episode that never aired because it would have been too depressing for viewers. And sure, it's not like you were together, but you're still left feeling so destroyed, which makes you sound very dramatic. But you simply can't take another loss, not after your mother. You thought you would never feel anything again. It was like every part of you was scooped out, all your insides rot, and you don't recognize yourself anymore. Then you find someone and you think maybe you can share all that love with them. And you want to believe love is real, you really do, but people make it so difficult. Nobody wants to hold each other anymore. Nobody wants to be there for one another. And you're fine in your sheltered life from any sort of romantic entanglement, really, but he sees you. And you realize you love being seen. Feeling something with someone again, well, it felt like hope. It was only after it was over that you realize you've been bending over backwards to try and prove to someone why you're worth their time, justifying yourself to them. How sad is that? You think to yourself, I could be so good for you. But then a voice in your head is like, but are they good enough for you? We spend so much time trying to fit ourselves into someone else's puzzle that we don't stop to think if they fit ours. And even then, surprisingly, you still have hope. Despite how it ended, it was beautiful. You still see that version of you two whenever you're on the L train. How you held hands and looked at each other like nobody else was there. There are billions of people out in this world, and yet the two of you were still able to meet, cross paths. Isn't that remarkable? Thank you. Yeah.
All right. Give it up for Josie, and let's keep it going for all of tonight's readers. Isabella, Alexa, Ariana, Sarah Jane, Grace, Michaela. I think I got everyone. So thank you all again for joining us and being such a wonderful audience. Just a reminder, we have Josie's poetry collection, Gotas de Amor, available for purchase at the register. Otherwise, please make sure you grab all of your personal belongings with you so we can start to break down and rearrange the space. And that's it. Have a great rest of your night. Thank you all again for coming. And thank you again to all the fantastic readers tonight. Have a good night, everyone.